So I want to start with a little bit of a warning. Just because we have some weaknesses doesn't mean that every single one of them need to be fixed. It's good that we're aware of them so that we know what's going on. And you can certainly improve them, but there really isn't a need for you to fixate on them and to just go down the list and start consuming yourself and all of your energy with fixing all of these things. It's not necessary, and some of them you really won't be able to fix completely.
Hi there, this is Sarah Kuhn. If you are an INFJ or in a relationship with an INFJ or related to an INFJ in any way, and you want to figure out how they operate, what makes them tick, and how to communicate with them better, this is the show for you. It's called The Quiet Ones. This is a show that deconstructs INFJs, what they are, how they think, how they feel, how they operate, and how they relate to people with other personality types. Whether you have just found out that you're an INFJ or have known for a number of years, there is something for everyone. You will learn more about your personality type so that you understand who you are and understand how you operate in the workplace, in relationships, in your family, and with friends. I want you to walk away from every episode feeling like you have a place of belonging, feeling like you are no longer alone, feeling like you have a place to be heard and seen and understood as you really are. This is a place to connect with other INFJs, to learn and grow and really thrive. I want to give you inspiration and real life strategies that are going to help you figure out how to live your best life every single day. Though INFJs are very rare, you are not alone in this world. You are not the only one who thinks the way that you do and feels the way that you do. Hear from real INFJs just like you.
Hi there, welcome to another episode of The Quiet Ones. Today we are going to be talking about INFJ weaknesses. A lot of INFJs actually focus on our weaknesses. We are really, really good at recognizing all of the problems that we have and then focusing on them. Like, we want to fix all of the problems, right? And there's nothing wrong with that most of the time, except when we start focusing on ourselves and then we see all of these problems and it's like, oh my goodness, there's some things that I'm not really good at, so I need to fix them all, right? I need to fix them all right now. Like, I have a list because I'm really good at lists and I know every single thing that's wrong with me and I want to fix it. So how do I fix it? That kind of mentality can lead you to a very, very dark place. So I want to start with a little bit of a warning. Just because we have some weaknesses doesn't mean that every single one of them need to be fixed. It's good that we're aware of them so that we know what's going on, and you can certainly improve them, but there really isn't a need for you to fixate on them and to just go down the list and start consuming yourself and all of your energy with fixing all of these things. It's not necessary, and some of them you really won't be able to fix completely. You can't change your personality. It is the way that it is. And like I said, you can make some things better, but they're not ever going to go away. So when we talk about weaknesses, I really suggest that you start by looking at your functions. If you haven't studied functions, you should definitely look into them. There are a couple of blog posts on my blog that I'll put in the show notes. And then also there's a section in my book, which is the INFJ user guide, which I have a copy of it here, and it actually is available now in paperback and it's on Amazon too. So you can go get a copy of it there, and you can get it for Kindle as well on Amazon. So there's a chapter in my book about functions. Definitely go through those, make sure that you have a good understanding of those. Functions are just as important as your preferences. So preferences are the letters INFJ, that's introverted, intuitive, feeling, and judging. So when we talk about our weaknesses, the first ones are our two lesser used functions, which is introverted thinking and extroverted sensing. The biggest functions that we have is introverted intuition and extroverted feeling. So the introverted intuition helps you understand what's going on with other people. It helps you just to know things without really having the facts and logic in front of you. It helps you to read between the lines when people are talking to you. Um, it works together with extroverted feeling, which is your ability to feel what other people are feeling, to basically soak up their emotions, right? Those are the two that we focus on the most as INFJs, and those are the two things that we know the most about. The lesser two functions are introverted thinking and extroverted sensing. So, introverted thinking looks to make their own personal decisions logical and standardized. They are more focused on individual rather than the whole experience. This is your ability to focus on yourself and make decisions in a logical and rational type of way. We're not really very good at that. A lot of times, we like to go with our gut, right? We have this really powerful intuition and it will tell us what we need to do. And sometimes it's not very logical. A lot of times it doesn't make sense to, especially to other people. If they have a thinking personality and a sensing personality, it's not going to make sense. And sometimes we focus so much on that it's difficult for us to think outside of that. The least used function that we have is extroverted sensing. So that is looking for exciting experiences outside of yourself, things that appeal to the senses. So things like taste, sound, sights, any type of experience that has to do with really using your hands and being present in the moment. We're not very good at that. A lot of those types of experiences overwhelm us because a lot of INFJs are highly sensitive. And if you're very introverted like I am, I'm like 94% introverted, then I tend to stay away from those types of situations. But I know that when I'm really overwhelmed, when I'm stressed out, when there's something going on that I just can't seem to wrap my head around, I usually dive into something that uses all of my senses to help get out of my head. One of the really good things is walking outside barefoot because it helps you use your senses. It helps you get outside and get some sunshine. And it also helps with grounding, which is when you can connect to the earth and the energy from the earth. It helps you a lot. Another thing that's really good to think about is shadow functions. There isn't a whole lot of information about shadow functions out there. I wrote a blog post about it that I will link in the show notes as well. Shadow functions usually only show up when you're in a really bad place, when you're super stressed out and you're going through a lot. This is any time that you act a way that's outside of your normal personality. If you do something that's really irrational or you make a super spontaneous decision and that's just like not something that you do, then I would definitely check in with shadow functions. And again, shadow functions aren't really things that you can change because most of them happen in your subconscious. So it's like, it's just an instinct. You can be aware of them because once I read about them, then I was able to recognize what was happening in the moment. And it was easier to deal with what was happening in the moment. I understood it, but it wasn't like all of a sudden I could just stop it. It's kind of like, when you're going on a diet and you're like, okay, I'm going to give up sugar. And you're like, yes, this is going to happen. But you drink coffee from Starbucks in the morning that has sugar in it, and you have a bag of M&Ms, and every single thing that you eat has sugar in it, and it's been that way every day for like 35 years. And you're like, 2 hours into your diet and you're like, oh man, this is like super hard. If you've been in that situation, you know what it's like. It's possible to change it, but it's incredibly difficult and it takes a lot of work. Okay, so let's talk about some of our other weaknesses. Procrastination is a big one for INFJs. We like to know everything about something before we do it, right? We like to have all of the information ahead of time. And then we want to think about all of the different outcomes. And so we use all of this time as planning. And we're like, you know what? If I just plan it perfectly, then when I do it, it'll be really good, right? I won't have to be bad at something. I can just know all the information ahead of time. So this is kind of like procrastination and perfectionism combined, right? So you're like, okay, I'll just put it off until I know how to do it really, really well. A good example of this was for me when I started blogging. I was like, you know what? I am going to start blogging, but I don't know how to spell. So maybe I'll learn how to spell first, which is really ridiculous because I took 12 years of spelling when I was in grade school and it didn't help. I still don't know how to spell. It's not one of my talents. I'm not very good at it. Please don't be surprised if you read my blog posts and there are some things that are not spelled correctly. I try really hard. I have like 5 different apps that try to correct my spelling, but sometimes they're like, you know what? I don't really have any idea what word you're trying to spell. I mean, that those letters don't even make a word. They don't even kind of make a word. The good thing is though, if you go to like the main search engine in Google and you put in a bunch of letters, it usually knows what you're trying to say. I don't know why Google is so much better than all of the other spelling services, but they seem to get it when nobody else can. So for the longest time, you know, I wanted to start writing a blog. I wanted to write a book, but I used spelling as like, nope, I can't do that. You know, like that's one of my weaknesses. So that's just like the reason that I'm not going to do it. But obviously I decided finally that I'm like, you know what? I really want to write. And I don't care if things are spelled incorrectly, you know, I'll figure it out. So that's what changed for me. I let it stop me. I let it hold me back for a long time. But then eventually I was like, you know what? It doesn't matter. I'll find a way around it. The best way to get through any change that you want to make, especially if you're looking to change or to improve one of your weaknesses, is to take action, right? You're not going to get better at spelling if you don't ever spell anything. If you're never writing, if you're never using that talent, you're never going to get better. There's still words that I can't spell. And even like definitely, I can never spell definitely. I don't know what's wrong with the search engine spelling, like with, you know, all the spelling apps. They always want to say like defiant, I think, or something like that. So, I mean, it's one of those things that you kind of just have to memorize or use Google like I do. But if you want to do something that like procrastination and perfectionism are holding you back, you have to take action. That's the only way to get around it. You have to write your blog even if you can't spell. You know, if you want to start running, but you're scared that you're going to look ridiculous running, because that was one of my things too. Like, I wanted to lose some weight and feel better about myself. So I was like, okay, I'm going to start running. But I'm like, I don't want people to see me running. I mean, that would be like super embarrassing. And plus I can't breathe. Well, I can't breathe in general because I have severe asthma, but then it's like, when I start running, then I really can't breathe. So I don't want people to see me looking like that. I mean, that would be terrible. So I thought, okay, I'll just watch a video about it. No, I'll just read a book about it. No, you know what? I need a professional coach. That's what I need, a running coach. I didn't need a running coach. There's no secrets that a running coach is going to tell you. There's no secrets that a book is going to tell you about running. If you want to learn how to run, you got to get out there and go run. Like that's the only way that you're going to get better at it. And that's the only way that you're going to get better at writing is to write. You can read all the books in the world, but that's not going to make you a better writer until you actually start writing.
Want to learn more about the INFJ personality? Check out my book, The INFJ User Guide. It covers every question you have about INFJs. It talks about preferences, functions, strengths, weaknesses, communication, relationships, how to find your purpose specifically for an INFJ, and what kind of career is best for INFJs. Get your copy today at infjwoman.com/book. There's a link in the video description.
So that's how you get around perfectionism, is just take action. Any kind of action will help you, even if it's just a small action. It doesn't have to be this big, massive action, right? If you're going to start running, you don't need to start with a marathon. You can start with just running for a minute straight. When I first started running, a minute seemed like an hour. It was like, oh, this is way too much. And then before I knew it, I was running 10 miles. It took several months, but you don't start with running 10 miles, right? You start with running for as long as you can run. And if you want to start writing, you don't start by writing a 60,000 word book. You start by writing a paragraph, and then you start writing a blog. And maybe your first blog is only 500 words. Maybe the second one is 700 words. And maybe after a while, you finally get up to 1,500 words. That's totally fine. And like I said, it doesn't matter if you can spell or not. You can still write a blog. Okay, so the next weakness that we have is anxiety. I really feel like INFJs have a whole different kind of anxiety. There was somebody that I interviewed on my podcast last year. Her name is Lauren Sapala, and she studies a lot. She's an INFJ. She studies a lot about INFJs and INFPs. And she was talking about INFJ anxiety like it's something that's completely different from regular anxiety. It's a little bit difficult for me to differentiate because I have a general anxiety disorder as well. So I feel anxious most of the time, right? Just in general. So it's difficult for me to say, okay, this is regular anxiety and this is INFJ anxiety, right? Because there isn't really a lot of research about that. There aren't people that, at least that I have been introduced to, that are studying it. But Lauren wrote this book, which for some reason I don't have in front of me right now. I don't know where it went to. But I'll put a link to it in the show notes as well. You can get it on Amazon. It's an amazing book, and one of the chapters she talks about anxiety, and she wrote this story about what her anxiety is, and I felt like it was like it could have been something that I wrote. She talks about something as simple as going to pick up lunch for the office that she worked in. She was like the office manager, the secretary, or whoever was in charge of picking up lunch. And she was super anxious sitting there waiting for the food to be ready because there was a ton of traffic, and she doesn't like to drive in traffic. And then she couldn't find a parking spot quickly, and then she had to wait for lunch, and she was later than what she liked to have lunch ready at that time. And so she was worried that everybody was going to be upset that lunch was later, even though in general they really didn't care. And then she was worried about traffic getting back to the office, and then the whole process of setting up. And so instead of sitting there in the restaurant enjoying the sunshine and the beautiful day outside, she was just filled with anxiety. And that seems like such a normal experience for me. I was reading it going, oh yeah, I've done that like a million times. I can relate to every single thing that she's saying. And then I also had this moment of, wait a minute, other people don't feel that way? Like, that's not normal? Like, I feel that way constantly. I've always felt that way. one of the big things for me is parking. I wrote a blog post about this as well. And for me, anxiety is like in the little details. I have some friends that I like to go out to dinner with every once in a while. And they like to pick a different restaurant every time we go out to eat. And I don't like that because I don't like new places. And I'm a vegetarian, so I'm always worried about like what's on the menu that I can eat. And then I'm worried about parking. You know, if you live in a city, there isn't always parking. Some of these places have zero parking. So you either have to park in a garage somewhere or you have to park on the street. And if it's a really busy place, you may not be able to find a parking spot on the street. I mean, you might have to plot to park miles away and either walk or get an Uber, which is so ridiculous. But I mean, it's part of the whole experience. And I don't just get nervous like when I'm trying to find a parking spot. I get nervous and anxious as soon as we make the plans. As soon as we're talking about a restaurant, I'm like frantically Googling it, going, okay, is there parking there? Like what's on the menu? Can I eat? I mean, and that's usually one of my first questions, you know, when they pick these places. I'm like, well, hold on, that's in the Seaport district of Boston. Like, is there parking there? Because there's never any place to park down there. Can we go somewhere else? Can we go a place that actually has a parking lot? And even some of the places that do have parking lots are like, well, what if they're full? Because they're not big enough to fit everybody, to fit every car, you know, for everyone who can fit in the restaurant. It's such a different dynamic from being in the Midwest where I grew up. There's always plenty of parking everywhere. Like, you don't have a restaurant that doesn't have parking with it. I mean, why would you build a restaurant that doesn't have parking with it? You know? But when you live in the city, in a big city like Boston, especially big cities on the East Coast of the United States, when you're talking about restaurants downtown, a lot of people don't drive. You know, they either walk or they take the T, which is the subway. So parking is like the least thing that's on their mind. They're not concerned about it. And people who grew up here, it's just normal for them, you know? And if you don't have anxiety, I guess you're just worried about it in the moment. But for me, it's like an overwhelming type of thing. It's and it's not just like about where I'm going to park, it's about dealing with and managing those feelings, right? You can let those feelings hold you back and say, well, I'm just not going to go out to eat because I don't want to deal with that anxiety. And I did that for a long time. But after years and years of doing that, it's like, wait a minute, I really need that connection. I really want to go out to eat with my friends, even if it's just once a month or once every other month. It helps so much to be able to talk to people and, you know, have a connection with them. So how do I manage that stress? Lauren talked about in her book, she talked about how she has like an internal gauge for how much stress that she has. She put a number on it. I've never really put a number on it. I guess I haven't been that aware of it. It's kind of difficult for me because it's something that creeps up on me. And because I live with it constantly, it's like sometimes I don't even realize how stressed out I am. And maybe that's part of being, you know, in the moment, being aware of your present surroundings. I'm not usually that way. I'm usually more of let's focus on the future and, you know, what do I have to get checked off of my to-do list today? Because if I don't have a list in front of me, then I have 100 other ideas that I want to do. Another thing that's a weakness for us that kind of goes hand in hand with anxiety is not asking for help. I know that's one of my biggest weaknesses. It doesn't matter what I'm going through. It's like, I can handle it. I've got this. And I think a lot of that comes from being burned by people in the past. I've asked for help in the past and have been denied over and over again. And it feels like a lot for me to ask somebody for help. And then when they don't provide the help that I need, or when they say no, or when they say you should be able to do that by yourself, then it's like, okay, I'm just not going to ask anybody for help about anything. And that can become a really bad habit too, right? Because sometimes you do need help. And sometimes if you would just raise your hand and say, "Hey, can you help me with this?" then you could figure something out a lot sooner and it could be a lot easier. So, I mean, I truly believe that independence is a really good thing. I think that we should be able to take care of ourselves and to fend for ourselves, but I think that we also need to find a balance in asking for help, and being able to do that, and finding the right people who can help us. Another one of our big weaknesses is having a lot of toxic people in our lives. And I've kind of talked about this in the past, and a lot of people talk about how INFJs sort of attract toxic people, people who just ask for like they ask for everything. And then when we ask them for help, they're like, "Oh, no, 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 I don't have time," or "That's too much," or, "Why would you ask me for that?" And I saw this thing on social media somewhere, and it was talking about how it's not that people like us attract toxic people, it's that we allow them to stay in our lives. We're not magnets for them, we just allow it. And that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks, because it helps you like reframe the fact that, okay, I'm not attracting toxic people. There's nothing wrong with me that's like attracting those people to me. The problem is that I'm allowing it. When you think about it that way, then it's like, okay, it's rough because you have to take responsibility for it, right? There's this element of personal responsibility that's like, oh, it's my fault, right? And nobody wants to admit that their problems are their fault. I don't even want to admit that. I would rather be like, no, it's a magnet, and I don't know how to like turn off the magnet. Can I get rid of the magnet? I don't really know why all these toxic people are in my life. That's way better, right? But when you own it, when you say, no, it's my fault that there are toxic people in my life, it's rough because you have to accept the responsibility. But then it's also empowering too, because you're like, I know what the reason is. I know why these people are here, and I can fix it. I can say enough is enough. No, I'm not going to accept those kind of people anymore. No, I'm not going to enable them. And maybe they're going to have to leave my life. I'm going to have to put up some boundaries and say, this is it. You're not going to take advantage of me anymore. And that's a difficult process to go through. It definitely is. But it's so worth it in the end, because if you have a whole string of toxic people in your life, you don't have room for anybody else. If you're anything like me, I only have room for so many people in my life. I don't like to be around a lot of people. I need space. And I'm also not very good at managing friendships. So if there are 2 or 3 people in my life who need a lot of attention, I'm not very good at maintaining all of them. So if there's just those 2 or 3 people, or maybe 4, that are toxic, and I'm trying to maintain those relationships, then where's the room for the people who aren't toxic? And if all I know how to deal with are the people who are toxic, the people who expect too much, who want too much, and don't give me anything in return, how am I going to have room for the people who aren't that way? You really have to clear out those people so that you have room for the people who will treat you right. And like I said, it's a difficult process, but it's so worth it. So worth it. And it's also not like a one and done type of thing, right? Just like you don't learn to stop eating sugar in one fell swoop. Most people don't. Most of the time, it's like you have to quit 1,000 times before you start getting better at it. You have to learn how to do it. You have to learn how to eat other things. You have to learn how to like other food. You have to learn how to say no. And it's probably going to be the same process with toxic people in your life. You're going to have to it's a process of trial and error, right? You're going to have to give up the toxic people, make some new friends, and maybe this time all 4 of your friends aren't toxic, maybe it's just 2 of them. But then you have to go through the process again and say, am I going to accept this or not? And then you have to go through eliminating them, and then maybe the next time only one of them is not good for you. And it's a constant process of saying, okay, is this what I need? Are these people good for me? Do I feel good when I'm around them? Are they encouraging me? Are they putting in as much effort as I'm putting into this friendship or relationship? It's not a one and done type of thing. Another weakness that we have, which sort of contributes a lot to the whole toxic people thing, is a lot of us have a high degree of self-love or of self-doubt. A lot of us have a high degree of self-doubt, and something that's called self-love deficiency. We're kind of prone to it because we're so good at focusing on other people, and it's difficult for us to focus on ourselves. We would much rather be focused on everybody else. We want to take care of all of their problems. We want to help them as much as we can. We're more comfortable in that position of focusing on other people. But then what happens when it's time for you to finally focus on yourself and you're like, I don't even know how to do that. I had this problem of, I was so good at pleasing other people. And then I got to the age where I had to start looking for a job. And this happened too when I didn't really have a lot of friends when I was growing up. I've really never had a lot of friends. I have more friends now than I've ever had in my life. And there's probably like 5 or 6 people on my list of friends. Most of them are like Facebook friends too. They're not like around where I live. But I've had this problem where my mom would say to me, well, your problem is that you just don't have a lot of confidence. You need some more confidence. And after she said that to me about 100 times, I was like, yes, I completely agree. I don't have confidence. Where do I get it? And she's like, I don't know. I've never had that problem. But you should really figure it out because it's a really bad problem. I'm like, great, that's super helpful. Obviously it's a really bad problem, but how do I fix it? She's like, I don't know. I really don't know. And honestly, I didn't figure out how to fix it until about 3 years ago. On the second season of my podcast, I interviewed a guy called Ross Rosenberg, who talks about, he wrote a whole book about self-love deficiency and why we have this problem in our lives and how to fix it. And once you understand the problem, and a lot of it comes from focusing on other people, right? Enabling other people, enabling toxic people in your life. Once you understand that, then it's so much easier to say, you know what? I deserve better. I don't deserve to be treated badly. I deserve to be treated as good as I'm treating everybody else, right? And maybe that means that the level of treatment that you're giving to everybody else, maybe that needs to be backed down a little bit. Maybe it doesn't need to be this super high level. Maybe it can be backed down a little bit. Maybe how you are treated and how you're treating other people, obviously they need to be equal, right? But maybe in the beginning they're not equal. Maybe you're just backing down how you're treating other people a little bit and then bringing up how you're treating yourself a little bit. And It's a process that could take some time, but eventually you will get to equal. It takes a little bit of work to be able to say, I deserve better, especially when you've been thinking, I don't deserve better for such a long time. But it's a really empowering thing to say, something that I found that helps me so much. When somebody's treating me really poorly, I usually just say that in my head over and over again. Like, I deserve better. I don't deserve to be treated this way. I need to figure out how to not do this. One more thing that I wanted to touch on is eating. Something that not a lot of people talk about, but I think is incredibly important. A lot of INFJs are prone to eating disorders because our extroverted sensing is so low in our functional stack. It's not something that we pay attention to a lot. So a lot of us have problems with either not eating enough or eating too much. And I've dealt with both of these problems. Under eating is usually because, a lot of people think it's because society tells us that we need to be a certain way, but that's not usually what causes it. It's not usually caused by focusing on how you look. It's more about control. If you feel like your life is out of control, that you don't have any control over anything, then something that's really easy to latch onto and take control of is how much you're eating, right? Then you feel like at least you have some kind of control. Overeating can be the same way. It's a coping mechanism for something else, right? It's not that you don't have any control. It's not that, you want to eat too much. It's a coping mechanism. For me, overeating has been a coping mechanism for depression. I feel depressed a lot because I have major depression. And so when I feel bad, I want something to fix that feeling right away. And over the years, I've taught myself basically that a way to feel better is to eat sugar or to eat fat. And so when you're constantly doing that, we all know that a sugar high only lasts so long, right? It's maybe a couple of hours. And so then after that wears off, then you want to feel better again. So then you go get some more sugar. And then after years and years of doing this, you become almost immune to it. So you have to eat like a higher amount of sugar in order to get that same feeling. And you have to eat it more often. And before you know it, it's like, wow, how did we get here? Like, how do I stop? Both of these disorders, either not eating enough or eating way too much, can be extremely dangerous. And they're not a game. They're not something to play with. They can be really, really serious. And this is one of the ones where I wanted to say, it's really, really difficult to reach out for help. I've been in that situation with depression and anxiety, and I've been in that situation with the eating disorder that I have. It's really difficult to raise your hand and say, hey, I need some help. I can't do this by myself. I've been to see counselors in the past. I've been to see doctors in the past. I've worked with nutritionists, with eating coaches, with health coaches. And it almost gets even harder when you start looking for help because it's difficult to ask for help. And then sometimes you run into people who aren't very nice, or they don't understand, or they give you advice that isn't good. And then you just get discouraged. But I wanted to tell you, first of all, that you're not alone, that there are other people out there who deal with this, me being one of them. And I wanted to tell you that there is hope, that you will get better, and that there are people out there who understand. And giving up is not an option. That's just, it's not an option. You have to keep going. You have to keep looking. There is something that will work for you. You just have to figure out what that thing is. And it might take a little bit of work. And there might be a little bit of discouragement along the way. There might be discouragement along the way with any of these things that you're trying to do. I've been taking this course recently that's kind of a personal growth slash, improving your business type of course. And one of the first things that they told us in the course was prepare for the dip. And what that means is that you're starting this journey to do something big, to make your life better, right? And it's really exciting and fun in the beginning because you have this change that you want to make, right? But when you're in that space of being excited and ready to go and super motivated, it's important that the first thing that you do is to think about the fact that there's going to be a place where you're overwhelmed and frustrated and aggravated, which is the dip, right? You're soaring high, and then all of a sudden there's this massive dip. So while you're soaring high, while you're super inspired and motivated, you need to think about the time that you're not going to be that way. And you need to make a plan to deal with that. So what are you going to do when you hit that dip? What are you going to do when somebody tells you that you can't change? What are you going to do when you feel like you're a failure? What are you going to do when you're like, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to, this change is super hard. Like, I can't do this. What are you going to do? Maybe you have a friend that you can reach out to, and maybe, before you get to that dip, you can reach out to that friend and say, hey, I'm going through this change. I want to make this change. I know that there's going to be a time where I'm frustrated. Can I text you in that time? And will you promise that you'll be supportive? Maybe there's something else. Maybe there's a podcast that you'd like to listen to. Maybe there's a book that you like to read. Maybe it's just getting outside and going for a walk to clear your head. Maybe you're into meditation or hypnosis. Any of those things can help, as long as you have a plan for that dip. Of course, I want you to know that it's okay to be less than perfect. All of us are. That's being human. None of us are perfect. And one of the biggest things is understanding. I've been focusing a lot on understanding recently because I realized that it's this huge thing in my life. The first thing that I do when I have a problem or there's a new idea, I want to understand what's going on. I want to understand the whole problem. I want to understand the whole idea. I want to understand who came up with the idea, the motivations behind it, what's the bigger picture. I want to see the whole idea, right? I think that's why I'm so interested in documentaries and things like true crime and stuff. I don't want to just know about the crime. I want to know about the process of justice. I want to know about the process of investigation. That all of that stuff is really interesting to me. And that's also a reason that I'm so I don't know, I want to say obsessed. I guess obsessed is the right word. I'm so determined to learn more about myself, about my own personality, because I know that the more that I know about myself, the more that I understand why I think the way that I do and why I act the way that I do, then the easier it will be for me to change the things that I don't like. And the easier it will be for me to accept who I am as a person. And the easier that it will be for me to relate to other people, to understand other people, to relate to them and to accept who they are, and to know how to communicate with them. So yeah, that's what I have about weaknesses. I hope that you learned a lot. There's a couple of blog posts. There's probably actually 3 or 4 because I tend to write a lot about strengths and weaknesses. There are a lot of things that people ask me about consistently. This is one of them. So that's why I wanted to put something out here about weaknesses. I'm probably going to do something about strengths in the future too, although I just haven't gotten to it yet. Make sure that you check out all of the links in the show notes so that you can read the blog posts. There are a couple of other podcast episodes that I did on them, so I will put those in the show notes as well. And stay tuned. There's a lot more about understanding coming. It's an idea that I've been working on, and I'm excited to share it with you. I also wanted to tell you that make sure that if you're not following me on Instagram, make sure that you do. My Instagram is at INFJwoman. I'm going to be doing more live videos. I've started a book club to talk about my book, the INFJ User Guide. You can also check out all the past videos on YouTube, which is youtube.com/INFJwoman, or you can just search INFJwoman on YouTube. I'm going to be doing a lot more about understanding as well, because I'm writing a new book that I'm super excited about. The title of it is it's called Relentless Understanding. And it's going to be a revolutionary guide to understanding yourself and finding self-love. And so I'm going to be documenting the whole process. Make sure that you follow me on YouTube so that you can check out those videos. If you have any questions about writing a book, or if you want to know about the process, or if you're just interested in understanding yourself more and you want to know more about self-love, all of those videos will be great for you to watch. So yeah, that's all I have. Thank you so much for listening and watching if you're on YouTube. And I will see you again next week.
So you just watched that video, and I'm sure you enjoyed it. If you want some more amazing information about INFJs, check out these videos right now. I'll see you there.